Disclaimer: the following video is for educational and research purposes and should be regarded as educational entertainment. It in no way glorifies the actions that take place in this video. In case the video you're about to watch may trigger PTSD or affect your mental well-being, feel free to exit the video and protect your peace. From yours truly, Inspector Truman. When you think of the United States of America, what comes to mind? Baseball?
The top of the order. Not that carefully. Left side.
Apple pie? Bald eagles? Pickup trucks? And Hollywood movies, right? However, in the 21st century, the United States of America has slowly become the school shooting capital of the world.
Another sick massacre at a small school.
When he went in the classroom, he said, "You're
And
all
each time I
gonna die."
learned the news,
The Department of Education came down hard on Virginia Tech today for the way it...
And after further investigations, I came across a date. April 20th, 1999. On a Tuesday afternoon, two teenage boys take over their high school in Littleton, Colorado, spotting black trench coats, homemade explosives, pipe bombs, a semi-automatic handgun, a sawed-off shotgun, and a high-point rifle. 18-year-old Eric Harris and 17-year-old Dylan Klebold would put the fear of God into students at Columbine High School. Within a matter of minutes, the Colorado police and the media were in a frenzy.
Okay, and the school is in a panic, and I'm in the library. I've got students down under the tables, kids! Heads under the tables! Kids are screaming.
Good afternoon, this is News 2, and we are following a breaking story today, a shooting at a high school in Littleton, Colorado, that's near Denver.
we have not confirmed the number of injured at this point.
He came into the library, shot everybody around me, then put a gun to my head and said as if we were all wanted to die. They just started coming in the library and opening fire.
And as every minute passed, the body count rose. After the ordeal, 15 people died and 21 were wounded, and the media would blast misinformation about Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, the infamous trenchcoat mafia, and blame the incident on pop culture icon Marilyn Manson.
Marilyn Manson.
Marilyn Manson.
Marilyn Manson.
Marilyn Manson.
After doing a bit of digging on this case, I found out the Columbine effect was part of Harris and Klebold's plan all along, and the media helped push their sick and twisted agenda. They might have lost the battle, but they did indeed win the war. My job today is simple: to take you through the incident, its aftermath, and expose the truth for what it really is. So join me as I uncover the minds of Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold and chase the unfiltered truth behind the Columbine Massacre. My name is Inspector Truman, and welcome to the Columbine Effect. In the middle of the United States of America lies a state that goes by the name of Colorado. In that state lies a family-friendly suburb named Littleton. Located south of Denver, Littleton is a tight-knit community where middle-class Americans get to raise their children in a loving, low-crime, and quiet community. To the Americans living in Littleton, it's indeed a slice of heaven.
This is a great place to raise your children. A really great place to raise your kids.
However, everything changed after Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold from Columbine High School decided to take up arms and mow down their fellow students.
Can you pick up? Hey, everybody!
Putting Littleton on the international spotlight. The Columbine Massacre was the most brutal school shooting in American history that shook the nation, its leaders, and its citizens to their core. Some might say, even to this day.
Sometimes Columbine bothers me. I'll be fine. That's okay. It's okay.
For us to understand the events that took place at Columbine, we need to investigate Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold's background. So let's unmask these two individuals and view them as normal teenage boys, so we can get an unbiased view of who they really were before April 20th, 1999. I know a lot of you watching who weren't familiar with the Columbine Massacre think Dylan and Eric had a weird or disturbing origin story. However, that couldn't be far from the truth. They grew up in the middle-class suburbs of Littleton, Colorado, and came from functional two-parent households. Dylan Klebold was born and grew up in Colorado. His parents were pacifists, where they didn't believe in spanking or violence. They all went to church as a family, and Dylan and his older brother both attended confirmation. So they were your typical white suburban Christian family. Eric Harris's life wasn't so different. He came from a two-parent household, but he moved around a lot because his father was in the Air Force. However, his parents earned a good wage and gave Eric a good life away from the inner cities, gangs, and drugs, but the moving affected Eric's social life. After his father left the military, he moved from New York to Colorado and settled down in Littleton. According to their neighbors, the Harris family was normal and good people. Dylan and Eric would meet and immediately click. Shortly, Klebold would introduce Harris to his other close friend, Brooks Brown, and they would form a tight-knit friend group. Dylan and Eric were also very active in school activities. Dylan at one point ran sound for the drama club, and both being fascinated by computers, helped maintain the school's computer servers. In their senior year, they both got jobs at a local pizza place. Eric Harris was such a hard-working employee that he was promoted to shift manager. I know you're asking yourself, why is this important? Well, you see, while working at Blackjack Pizza, they would meet a member of the Trenchcoat Mafia who also worked at Blackjack Pizza. Eric and Dylan would form a bond with this guy and become friends. The Trenchcoat Mafia represented the outcast at Columbine, and their "F-you, don't care" attitude towards the world really attracted Eric and Klebold, and they became close with this group. However, Eric and Dylan didn't fit in with them, and they were cast out of the group. People thought they were too nice, and that they weren't outcast. They had friends, and they were well known in school. I would also like to talk about Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris's personalities and mental health. Dylan was diagnosed with paranoia and depression and struggled with both these issues. He was also prone to self-harm and contemplated self-deletion. I believe because of his paranoia, he wrote in one of his notebooks, and I quote, "I'm an outcast, and everyone is conspiring against me." Eric, on the other hand, was charismatic and charming, but he was very manipulative. Eric also had anger issues, and he channeled this into self-drawn comics and writings, showing homicidal fantasies, and even named one of the books the Book of God. To take it even further, he would also act out his fantasies in the game Doom, a first-person shooter game on his computer. At school, one of his classmates reported that both Klebold and Harris identified as pro-Nazi and idolized Hitler. Dylan was a proud vocal racist, as you'll see later, but Harris was less racist but had a weird fascination with genocide, and he would draw swastikas to entertain himself. Remember Brooks Brown? Dylan's childhood friend who would later become close friends with Harris as well. After one too many disagreements with Brooks Brown, and after being banned by Brooks' parents from visiting their house, Eric Harris would take to his website to disclose how he hated everyone and wanted to kill everyone in Denver, especially Brooks Brown. He also wrote about his fascination with pipe bombs. Due to the death threats towards their son and the pipe bomb information on Eric's website, Brooks' parents went to the police and a search warrant was drawn up. But they couldn't prove it was him sending the threats, and the URL of the webpage was taken down and the emails were deleted. It was also never taken to a judge, and the person in charge of the investigation never picked it up again. However, Dylan would warn Brooks about the webpage post, and as he started getting threatening emails from Harris, that's what prompted his parents to go to the police. However, Eric and Brooks patched things up, but Brooks always kept his distance from Eric because he knew how dangerous he was. January 30th, 1998. Dylan and Harris would get arrested for breaking into a van and stealing some electronics. They were later charged with breaking and entering, mischief, trespassing, and theft. Due to the nature of their crime and them being first-time offenders, they were placed in a juvenile diversion program and sentenced to community service and psychiatric treatment. They did so well in this program that they got amazing references from their probation officer, who discharged them from the program a few months later. It is believed that 1998 was the year the two started planning the massacre, and they called it Judgment Day. So what do we know so far? Both Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold had run-ins with the law. They both had anger issues, and they started planning for Judgment Day approximately a year before it happened. My question is, what did they do to prepare for this event? Because judging from their execution, it was far from amateur. First things first, they had to gather supplies for their assault, and all this was done in secrecy. Some of the supplies they got from the local hardware store, which they used to make bombs. Many people ask how 17-year-old Dylan Klebold and 18-year-old Eric Harris knew how to make bombs. Well, with motivation from the Oklahoma bombing and the presence of the internet, it's very simple. They just downloaded the instructions from the internet and went to work. In the month of October of 1998, they made 23 pipe bombs. 5 months before the assault, the pair would try to purchase guns at a gun fair, but due to their age, they couldn't. This frustrated Harris, and he would go on to write in his journal, and I quote, "I have enough explosives to kill 100 people. That's just not enough. Guns. I need guns." According to what happened on April 20th, 1999, Eric and Dylan had guns. A semi-automatic handgun, a sawed-off shotgun, and a high-point rifle. But how did these minors get these guns? Again, it wasn't complicated. Older individuals who had no link or idea of their endgame. A day after they were denied access to the guns at a gun show, they went back with an older friend who purchased the shotguns and the high-point rifle for them. However, it didn't end there. 3 months before the assault, they enlisted the help of Phil Duran. Who was Phil? Well, he worked with them at Blackjack Pizza, the pizza joint Dylan and Eric worked at. However, Phil didn't know what the guns were for. Phil Duran acts as a middleman between the two and Mark Maines. What happened was, Mark sold them a semi-automatic handgun for $500. Now they had everything. From here on out, the deal was simple. All they had to do was keep a low profile. It was also around this time that they would use the school's television equipment to make their Hitman for Hire film that was somewhat similar to what was about to come.
I'll rip off your goddamn head!
Look, I don't care what you say. If you ever touch him again, I will freaking kill you.
Guess what? It didn't spark any suspicions. 2 months later, February of '99, a teacher would question Dylan on an essay he wrote. The essay was about a man in a trench coat who goes on a shooting spree. His teacher schedules an appointment to meet with his parents, and when the parents confronted Dylan about the issue, he shrugged it off as just a story. And it ended there, believe it or not. March 1999, 1 month before Judgment Day, Dylan and Eric go to a shooting range in the mountains outside of Denver and practice their aim on trees and bowling pins, grinning at how accurate and destructive their shots were. The teacher in charge of the equipment wasn't aware that the school's video equipment was used for taping shooting practice. Their plan was completely set, and now all they had to do was rain hell on their target, Columbine High School. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold had a well-thought-out plan to execute their sick and twisted mission. The map before you is a map of Columbine High School. What we're gonna do is we're gonna synchronize our watches to 11:10 a.m. And then we're gonna follow Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold step by step as they wreak havoc at Columbine High School. Are you ready? If you are, let's go. 20th April 1999, Tuesday, 11:10 a.m. To the students of Columbine High School, it was a typical Tuesday. As some students gathered for lunch, the cafeteria would slowly fill up, and within a couple of minutes, the cafeteria will have a total of 500 students. Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris arrive at Columbine High School and park their cars at unusual spots. Brooks Brown, while smoking in the same parking lot, notices the two and decides to approach them. He was extremely hard on Eric because he had missed an important test that morning. Eric looked at him and told him it didn't even matter. On that day, he noticed apart from the usual trench coat Eric had, he also had a suspicious duffel bag with him. As Brooks continued to poke fun at Eric, Eric interrupted him and told him, and I quote, "Brooks, I like you now. Get out of here. Go home." As Brooks heard these words from Eric's mouth, he decided to listen to Eric and walked away. While Brooks was a block away, he heard what sounded like gunshots. Now back to Dylan and Eric. At around 11:14 a.m., Dylan and Eric would place 2 duffel bags in the cafeteria without arousing any suspicion. The duffel bags contained one of the bombs the two had made, and they were set to go off at 11:17 a.m. After placing the 2 explosives, they walked back to their car and waited for the bombs to detonate. However, the bombs didn't detonate as planned, so they had to switch to plan B. Shoot anyone and everyone. Outside the school's west entrance, 2 students were sitting in the grass and having a conversation. The students were none other than 17-year-old Richard Castaldo and 17-year-old Rachel Scott. As they talked, a pipe bomb lands a few feet from them and fails to explode. 60 feet away, Castaldo notices 2 assailants in black trench coats, a shotgun, a sawed-off shotgun, a semi-automatic handgun, and a rifle. The 2 pull the guns from their trench coats and open fire at Castaldo and Rachel. Rachel is shot 4 times and dies instantly, and Castaldo is shot 8 times, shattering his 2 vertebrae, and begins to lose feeling in his legs. 3 more students step out of the cafeteria and get shot, killing one of them and mortally injuring the other 2 who miraculously survived. 5 more students outside basking in the sun due to the long lunch line were also hit. 4 of them were able to take cover in a nearby building and survive, despite horrific injuries. However, the 5th student wasn't so lucky. He was shot 8 times. Due to his injuries, he couldn't move and decided to play dead, thus saving his life. 11:24 a.m. Eric and Dylan make their way to another entrance and shoot while throwing pipe bombs. In the hallway is teacher Patty Nelson, who was a hall monitor that day. She instantly recognized Eric and Dylan as Columbine students and think that they're shooting a film. As she approaches them to tell them to stop, they begin shooting at her and she immediately turns and runs to the library. In the cafeteria, which was in the lower level of the school, 42-year-old teacher Dave Sanders warned students that there were gunmen in the school and that they should get out. 11:25 a.m. Patty Nelson gets to the library. She grabs the phone and calls the cops. This is the actual recording of the call. I would like to warn you, what you're about to watch could be a bit disturbing.
And I'm in the library. I've got students down under the table, kids. Heads under the table. Kids are screaming. Some of the teachers are, trying to take control of things. We need police here.
Okay, we're getting them there. Who is the student, ma'am?
I do not know who the student is.
By this time, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold had made their way to the main hallway, and Dave Sanders, the teacher who just warned students at the cafeteria, was at the end of the same hallway. Dylan and Eric spot him and open fire. He suffers 2 gunshot wounds and starts bleeding profusely as 2 teachers drag him to a nearby classroom. 11:29 a.m. Harris and Klebold are now in the library. In the library, there are 52 students, 2 teachers, and 2 library workers hiding under the tables. This, ladies and gentlemen, was a massacre. The first person to lose his life was poor Cal Velasquez. He was a gentle soul who was mentally challenged. At the time of the shooting, he was so scared and confused and just froze in his seat at a computer desk instead of hiding like the rest. Dylan Klebold shot him in the back of the head, killing him instantly. Then they yelled for all the jocks to stand up. Anyone with a white cap or shirt with a sports emblem is dead. By this time, the police were already at the scene, and through the window, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold shot at the officers, shattering the glass. What happened next would shock the world. They proceeded to go table to table and end the lives of students. 3 would be shot dead and severely injured. They then made their way to Isaiah, one of the few African American students at Columbine High School. Dylan Klebold, being the outspoken racist he was, called to Eric Harris and said, "We have an N-word over here." They then pulled him from under the table, and according to a friend of Isaiah who was close by, he recalled hearing Isaiah's last words, "I want to see my mom." They would later shoot him and leave him lifeless on the ground. 15-year-old Daniel Mauser tried to fight back, and sadly he was no match for the guns the 2 carried, and he was shot at point-blank range, killing him instantly. 5 more students would lose their lives as they made their rounds in the library. Time they were done, they left 10 people dead and 12 wounded. 11:37 a.m. The two would exit the library and walk towards the science room. Minutes later, about 30 students would flee from the library through the emergency exit. That's when this happened.
Guy at a table right next to me and her, and they just shot him and then walked away, and then he was just sitting there in a pool of blood.
We all got under the desk, and then they just started coming in the library and opening fire. And he came into the library and shot everybody around me, then put a gun to my head and asked if we all wanted to die.
11:44 a.m. Klebold and Harris make their way to the cafeteria, and one of them shoots at the undetonated explosives. It bursts into flames, activating the sprinklers. This distraction enables students to run for their lives. A student provides the police with crucial information about the gunman. He identified 18-year-old Eric Harris. Due to his criminal record, the DA's office grabbed his information as well as Dylan Klebold's information. Students would later inform the police that Dylan was also involved. By this time, Columbine was swarmed by police and SWAT teams and paramedics, trying to take out the gunman and save the wounded students. The front of the school looked like a real-life movie scene. At 12:02 p.m. While outside the school, police heard gunshots coming from the library. Dylan and Harris had returned to the library from the cafeteria. Dylan and Harris would take their last stand in the library and engage in one last shootout with the police, but no one was hurt. 1 hour and 43 minutes later, the police and SWAT teams make it into the building, and teacher Dave Sanders still fights for his life as students try to stabilize him. Officers sweep the school, rescuing survivors. 2:42 p.m. Police secure the entire school and move into the science room, and as police wait for medics escorted by police to come to Dave's aid, they were too late. He dies from his wounds. 3:22 p.m. The police finally reach the library, and what they saw still shocks them to this very day. The room was littered with bodies of students, and as the police combed through the library, they finally find the bodies of 18-year-old Eric Harris and 17-year-old Dylan Klebold. After exchanging fire with the police for the last time, the two went ahead and turned their guns on themselves, taking their own lives.
That is a lot of fucking cops.
There's a unit coming.
Come on, let's go get a couple. No.
You're talking about shooting and responding units?
No. Come on, let's go.
One perpetrator's apprehensive.
I'm done. What are you... What? How are you done? Okay, you're done. I'm not done. No. Look, it's alright. We'll just... Would you rather get shot by cops or yourself?
We may have attempted suicide.
Yes, you're right.
We may have an attempted suicide.
The police, however, had no doubt that they were indeed the gunmen, as they were fully armed and were surrounded by guns and explosives. And just like that, it was over. The sheer ripples that Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold left were felt both nation and worldwide. The trauma the students at Columbine suffered was great, and words alone could not explain it. 15 people died that day, 8 males and 4 females, 1 teacher, and the 2 gunmen. After the shooting, a student who witnessed teacher Dave Sanders' death took his own life. Another student developed an opioid addiction from his injury medication, died from an accidental overdose. 10 days after the Columbine incident, despite a community in mourning, Charlton Heston held a big pro-gun rally for the NGA, National Gun Association, and this is what he had to say.
I have only 5 words for you. From my cold, dead hands.
Marilyn Manson was getting canceled to where he even canceled a performance 2 years after the massacre at Denver, in respect to the happenings at Columbine.
Marilyn Manson has canceled the last 5 dates of his U.S. tour out of respect for those lost in Littleton.
People rallied and gave speeches to cancel this artist.
If Marilyn Manson can walk into our town and promote hate, violence, suicide, death, drug use, and Columbine-like behavior, I can say, not without a fight you can't.
Schools started being ridiculously strict. For example, a student from Virginia High School was suspended for a month for dyeing his hair blue. A second grader from Illinois was suspended 10 days after bringing a nail clipper to school. Students from 7 different states were suspended and arrested for allegedly talking and planning plots of their own. I completely understand people were scared and no one was taking any chances. Children in America went from little angels to potential domestic terrorists, and parents nationwide were concerned. A part of me wanted to leave this video right after I recorded the aftermath, but I just couldn't. I still had unanswered questions and speculations, and so I went on a small investigation. And this is what I found. First of all, a lot of Columbine facts that floated around were false. 1. The fact that Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris were victims of severe bullying and were teased for listening to Marilyn Manson and wearing black trench coats. The fact that they were rejected by girls in their school and they had this rage they harbored for their fellow students that led them to raise arms and kill. That's the story the public is fed as the origin story of Klebold and Harris. The only truth to that is that the two did listen to Marilyn Manson occasionally. Eric Harris was very charismatic and had no problem getting girls. Dylan Klebold went to prom months before the attack, even though he was shy around women. Dylan and Eric did suffer occasional teasing and alienation, but they were not victims of bullying. These are two people who praised Hitler and drew swastikas in class for fun. People avoided them, and most of the time they kept to themselves. 2. The Trench Coat Mafia. The Trench Coat Mafia is referred to a group of teenagers who wore black trench coats and wore makeup. Their tastes were dark, and some were rumored to be gay. There was a group of students at Columbine who identified with the Trench Coat Mafia. But Dylan and Klebold tried to join, but they couldn't fit in because they had thriving social lives, unlike the members of the Trench Coat Mafia. But the media, namely the papers, claimed that they were members of the Trench Coat Mafia, which was inaccurate.
And we understand from one witness, a student who goes to Columbine High School, that she describes a group that used to hang out, in her words, at the school, used to go by the name of Trench Coat Mafia.
You know, sometimes we just drive around together. We're just a normal group of friends.
She says it was only this school year that Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold attached themselves to her group, but they were never a real part of her clique. They did not even pose with them for the yearbook photo.
3. Let's talk about Cassie Bernal, one of the victims that lost their lives during the massacre. The story goes that before her death, one of the shooters asked her if she still believes in God, and she said yes. This launched a Christian movement after Columbine. We're talking rock gospel songs. Cassie's mother even went as far as to write a book titled She Said Yes. Cassie became famous for her devotion to Christ. However, that couldn't be far from the truth. The real person who confessed their faith during the shooting was Val Schnur, who survived and still has 4 bullets lodged in her abdomen. By the time the truth came out, it was too far gone and there was nothing that could have been done. 4. Last but not least, after hours of trying to put the puzzle pieces together, I finally found the big picture. Columbine wasn't supposed to be a shooting. The actual goal of Dylan and Eric was for the bombs to explode and they would stand at the entrance and finish off all the remaining survivors. Columbine was a failed bombing turned mass shooting. Dylan and Eric didn't have a hit list. They killed at random, and some of the victims never even met the 2 shooters. They did it for notoriety and fame. They knew every major news outlet would cover the story, and the narrative of them being loners would sweep the media by storm because that was the only logical explanation at the time. There are videos that are kept from the public of them discussing who was going to get the rights to the movie, Tarantino or Spielberg. They became the poster child for loner teenagers who had a vendetta against jocks in America. What does the Sandy Hook shooter, the Virginia Tech shooter, the Santa Fe shooter, among other 30+ shootings, have in common? They were all influenced by Columbine. What does that tell you? They got exactly what they wanted. Sue Klebold, Dylan Klebold's mother, still gets letters from women who are in love with Dylan, not to say the least. In conclusion, I would like to offer my condolences to all the parents that lost their children during Columbine. And for all the survivors that are still pushing on with life, may you find peace, and I'm proud of you for being strong. To any idiot that may try to copy these 2 shooters, please, violence is not the answer to any of life's hardships. talk to someone, and if push comes to shove, see a licensed therapist. Let's create a future where children are safe in their schools. Be sure to report any suspicious activity in your school or even at an event. Your voice could save thousands of lives. Be sure to check out A Mother's Reckoning, Sue Klebold's book, for more information, and all the proceeds from her book goes to mental health research and suicide prevention. For those who aren't satisfied with the information in this video, Columbine by Dave Cullen and No Easy Answers: The Truth Behind Death at Columbine by Brooks Brown, a friend of both Eric and Dylan, are a good place to start. I'm not sponsored by them, but the books did help me make this video. Lastly, if you're ever in Colorado or Denver, be sure to visit the memorial that was built in honor of all the victims and pay your respects. All in all, let's come together collectively and fight against school shootings in America. Ladies and gentlemen, another day, another case. And this one looks like it's all the way solved. And my time here is up. So till next time, always remember to keep trekking, fam.